Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The Olympic dream of the Australian heavyweight champion Justis Huni has been shattered through injury. So he is now out of the games. He was a medal chance. He's made a statement on social media. We'll get to that and then to a few thoughts, because there could be some blame to go around here for his handlers, or is this just one of those things? But we'll just talk about it after the statement. So first though, Justis Huni saying on social media, "It is with a very heavy heart that I announce that my dream of representing Australia at the Olympics this year has been shattered. Both my hands had been injured during a sparring session leading up to the Tsoye fight. I had to have injections into my thumb, knowing that surgery would be required after the Olympics to fix it properly. In the Gallen fight, however, I aggravated both hands in the first round, and my team sent me straight for an MRI after the fight, which confirmed our worst fears, that I require an operation ASAP on both hands. I would like to thank everyone for their support and understanding with this, as I'm truly gutted, and I know you will be too, but know that I will be back bigger and stronger. Take care and make sure you cheer the rest of the Australian Olympic boxing team. Justis JPH Huni." Hashtag Justis JPH Huni, etc. So Justis Huni there. So I guess first thing, I feel for the guy in the sense that the culmination of years of work, this goal of going to the Olympics, has now been sort of taken away from him through injury. So in that sense, I feel for Justis Huni, because obviously he wanted to go there. He wanted to try win a medal, win gold, do as well as he could. And ultimately that would have been a good springboard for his career had he done well. I'm sure in his pro career, even if he hadn't have medalled, it would have been a good experience. And as he says, it was a dream of his to go to the Olympics. So on that front, yeah, feel for the guy. But questions now about, well, is this actually surprising? Because I had raised some questions a couple of videos ago before some of these fights, like the Gallen one, the Christian Tsoye fight, that his goal was to go to the Olympics. But was it actually pushing him through, a relatively heavy schedule? Was that actually something that was going to backfire and ultimately, end in injury and put him out of the games? And, it happened. So it wasn't just me. There were other people as well going, his goals to go to the Olympics. Is his pro career being prioritized over that Olympic dream? And maybe the answer is yes, but maybe it is just one of these things. But I would just sort of note, so bearing in mind, so he fought Jack Maris, this was in April. Then he fought Christian Tsoye, that was in May. And then he fought Paul Gallen, that was obviously earlier this month in June 2021. So you have 3 fights in 3 months, 2 of those going almost 10 rounds. So the Gallen fight stopped in the 10th round and the Tsoye fight did go the 10 rounds. So that's almost 20 rounds of action there. And the Jack Maris one, that was 1 round and he stopped Maris in that one. But it has to be also noted, he was meant to face Maris earlier in the year, but there was actually some concussion symptoms that he'd sustained, and that ultimately forced him to push that fight back. So ultimately, his handlers decided he was going to have these 3 fights in 3 months ahead of the games, which obviously start very shortly. It was, a question, was this going to backfire? And clearly they, were going to push him through to the games despite him being injured leading up to the Tsoye fight. They were going to keep that quiet. They were going to make sure that he got through the games and whatever happened, happened. But with the Gallen fight, he injures both hands and now he's out of the games altogether. And actually, Paul Gallen said in the lead up to the fight, even though after the fight he sort of said this was just part of selling the fight, he said he was going to try to shatter Justis Huni's dream, was going to try to injure him and make sure he didn't get to Tokyo. I guess in some ways that's a prophecy that Paul Gallen predicted that came true, although I don't think he really intended it for it to come true. But I mean, these things happen to some extent, and that'll be the other sort of question. Is this just one of those things that even if he hadn't have had these fights, he could have been injured? And that's, always a risk. But I do sort of lean towards the side of, well, they've put him in these different opportunities, 3 professional fights in the past 3 months. And you have to remember, he's in camp for all of that, so it's not like he's had a lot of downtime in 2021. Bearing in mind, he was training for a fight which originally would have been in February. That was the Maris one, and then he's continued to train for the Maris fight, the Tsoye fight, the Gallen fight, and he's been injured. So it does appear on the surface, at least, that maybe there is some blame to go around for his handlers, because they've obviously tried to prioritize money, and bearing in mind the Gallen and Huni fight was on pay-per-view. So that was a big event to try to build his name, and he obviously got a lot of buzz and hype from that performance, dominating Paul Gallen throughout, and obviously dominating him even through injury too, hurting both hands in that first round. I mean, there were a number of people coming to my post-fight review video saying that Huni wanted to punish Gallen, and that's why it went all the 10 rounds, but perhaps it was actually related in some ways to the injury too. Perhaps he just couldn't get Gallen out of there because of the pain associated with the injury or whatever. I don't know. That's just speculation, but remembering boxers don't get paid for overtime. So it was a little surprising he wasn't able to get him out of there in the 3rd round, I believe it was, when he had Gallen on, the stanky leg. But obviously he hurt Gallen multiple times through that fight. And all those punches that he was throwing in that fight, they were probably adding up and adding some damage there to his hands. So I do think that his handlers potentially have a bit of blame to wear with this, because putting him through the schedule they did, the 3 fights, a couple of hard ones too. I mean, Christian Tsoye was a tough guy. That was 10 tough rounds of Justis Huni beating him up, obviously, with injured hands. And then Paul Gallen, that fight, he injures his hands again. I guess the question now as well is Justis Huni a bit of a red flag on the injury front for the rest of his career? Because this is not minor, it's not inconsequential. It's putting him out of the Olympic Games. He's required to have surgery on both of his hands. And then you have to factor in as well, earlier this year he had the concussion-like symptoms that was apparently sustained in some sort of wrestling accident where he landed on his head, but it ultimately delayed a fight. And people had been asking the question ahead of the Gallen fight, is that something we need to be worried about? And now we have this other thing with his hands. Is he going to be a guy that has a shorter career due to injury? It's, 22 years old, and it seems to be a relatively serious injury, serious enough to derail his Olympic dream. So it is a question. So I wish him all the best, and hopefully he does get well and his hands do heal well. And I guess the thing is, they need to look after him and not rush him. If they're trying to put the almighty dollar in front of everything to try build his name, his profile, and make him a bigger star in Australia, and then further afield, later on, sometimes, these things have to happen in good time, not all at once. And perhaps you can sort of say, with the schedule that they've rushed him here, they've tried to make some money quickly, build his name, and then obviously the Olympics would have been the cherry on top if he had have medalled or won gold or whatever. But it has backfired, in my view, to some extent, having this hard schedule, these hard fights like Tsoye. It's not just complete journeyman. He wasn't able to get him out of there. He was able to beat him up over 10 rounds, and the same with Gallen. But those guys stood in front of him, were able to take a lot of his punishment, and ultimately that's probably had some wear and tear on his hands. But what do you make of it all? Who's to blame here? Is anyone to blame? Is it just boxing people get injured, or did they push things a little too far? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.